Okay, guys. So yesterday we were discussing about some of the weaknesses of the idea of folkgeist, some criticisms of it. So as I remember, we discussed that folkgeist is a kind of mystic, which is not reducible, reducible to learning by experience. Uh, so, so problem here is that the thing is, where do we find folkgeist? So, where does this idea of people's conscience or people's spirit actually lie? So, the differences that you find in laws quite often are accidental. Okay, so and you don't have to really find it in the spirit of the people, and because of those differences, those legal systems are not radically different. For us to attribute those differences to the spirit of the people. So you remember the criticism as was made by John Chipman Gray, as we discussed regarding completion of a contract. Okay. Mm, so yes, that's that's essentially how Gray criticizes. So Savigny, in fact, gives an answer to that criticism when he says that, well, uh, folk just exist. Okay, maybe people are not aware of where what it really is, but then we have judges and legal scholars who are to work out the technical details on behalf of the people. Okay, so yeah, that's his point. But nonetheless, not a very strong difference, because in the legal systems that we are part of, every now and then you see new legislations are being wrought. Okay, and I mean, it just ridiculous to be saying that those legislations do or are supposed to reflect the consciousness of the people. Apart from that, people's attitude also change every now and then. So a lot of 20th century jurisprudence shows how some laws aim actually at changing public attitude. Now think of it. Okay, we have a problem here. Okay, people, we see that new roads are constructed, dividers are colored, and then after a while you see that it's red colored. So sorry. So people have this habit of chewing pan and then spitting on the street. So, is there a spirit of the people there that we need to be respectful of? Now, you know that laws are quite often brought so as to bring about change in public attitude. This is a silly example, but there are many other things, okay, with respect to which the laws, in fact, bring about changes. Now, we had historically some very regressive practices. For example, honor killing, then female feticide, then widows were not allowed to marry, and then we had sati, and you also heard a lot about triple talaq. Okay, now through laws, legislations, you know, we actively try to bring about some radical changes in the attitudes of the people. Okay, so we do that either through incentives or by virtue of creating disincentives. Okay, so what about folk geist then? Where should we be respectful of all such practices because they are so innate in the people, in the nature of the people, in the cultures of the people? That's not really the case. In fact, in the next school of jurisprudence that we are going to study, that is Sociological School of Jurisprudence, you will see that they essentially attribute us important purpose to laws, that laws are used so as to bring about social transformations, okay, for certain progressive causes. So yeah, uh, historical school and their idea of folk seems to be a romanticization of the glorious past. That's it, as it appears to me. Then yes, apart from that, Savigny was also opposed to this idea of codification at first, and he was of the idea that if at all we are to codify the law, it has to be the people's consciousness, okay, their own law that will come up when the law is, if at all it is codified. But we have many examples where one country adopted a legal code that belonged elsewhere. So as you know, Japan took the German code. So we have many such examples. Okay, Egypt took it, Turkey took codes. Okay, so we have seen civil codes being imported to different countries, and you can for sure know that in these cases those codes were not reflecting the country which imported them, adopted them, that they were not representing their own folkgeist, if at all such a thing exists. For that matter, the French Civil Code in itself is a product of certain naturalistic ideas, and which definitely meant discontinuity with the past. Of course, certain customary laws were codified, but it was hugely affected by natural law ideas. So where is this idea of common consciousness then? And in our own case, we see that we have adopted this English common law system with suitable, Indian own material introduced, okay, not by the people of India or their, their own some juristic surrogates, but by English lawyers. So you look at IPC, it's work by Thomas Macaulay, okay, and it's working here properly till now, okay. So how is that possible, okay? So, and and there are certain technological changes happening every now and then, and the existing laws have to keep up with those, um, changes that happen in the society. Okay, law has to keep up with the societal changes. Okay, so if we are to incorporate those changes, okay, not because people themselves are transferring, but because of necessities. Okay, technological developments, etc., etc. In such case, looking back into the past will not be of much help. Instead, we need to brainstorm and then think of the best laws that we can create to address the changing technological developments and their impacts on our lives. So yes, as I told you, it seems to be it's fine to arouse a kind of respect among people of their own laws and legal system, but over romanticization will also have certain, I think, great side effects. So essentially, folkgeist had come up as a challenge to two dominant theories, as we have already discussed. Okay, so essentially, it was a criticism of legal positivism. Back then it was the command theory, that law as a command of some sovereign. Okay, so that theory said that all law in its concrete form is founded upon the express enactments of some supreme power, that is the sovereign. So jurisprudence has only the contents of enactments, for its object. And then you had natural law. Okay, it talks about certain higher idea of natural law, the conviction that there is a practical law of nature or reason, an ideal legislation for all times and all circumstances, which we have only to discover to bring positive law to permanent perfection. So that's essentially what the idea we discussed with respect to French Civil Code. It was essentially based on the natural law idea as it existed back then. So historical school was a response to both these two approaches. One, law as a command, that is legal positivism as it existed then, and natural law, as was so prevalent during Savigny's time. So against both these two approaches, the historical school insists that the laws of a particular people emerge and ought to emerge from unique historical experiences of the people. Okay, so it is not to be externally imposed. It's not from without. It's not from outside. It's not from over and above. It's from within. It's from within the people. So it emerges also, if we are to take folkgeist seriously, from unique spiritual qualities of the people, qualities originally formed, no doubt, by their historical experience, but freestanding at any point of time. But as you know, these are just fine. I mean, these are good to arouse, to evoke, respect among people for their own law, for their own legal system. But beyond a certain point, over glorification does not really help. It might perpetuate obscurity. Okay, that's something you do not want. Legal systems have to, and laws have to keep up with the, in today's time, very rapid changes happening in the society. So yeah, so the criticisms for this idea would be that folk just has this overblown ideas of continuity and tradition. Okay, things change. Okay, you and for and you do not, to address the problems that come before us. It's important that we brainstorm now rather than just think of what was there in the past. And apart from that, as you know, for our philosopher here, our jurist here, although Carl von Savigny talks about Folkgeist, he himself does not, subscribe to this idea when he thought that, Roman law, which was, taken up and adopted in Germany in the Middle Ages, not Middle Ages, later, much later, is really their own spirit. Okay, so there's a kind of hypocrisy, isn't it? He talks about people's own law, but then he approves of some other law being adopted in Germany. So yeah, but then he talks about law being common consciousness of the people. But then you also have great jurists, who through their extraordinary work are also able to make substantial contribution to legal development in a particular legal system. In common law legal system, judges play a great role, okay, if they're outstanding in development of the laws. So yeah, how do we account for that in the idea of Folkgeist as was conceptualized by Savigny? Apart from all this idea of Folkgeist also didn't influence much. It was essentially restricted to that of Germany. And in other countries, as we just discussed, they have been successful in adopting laws and codified laws, of which they didn't share much in terms of history. Further, in today's society, we use laws so as to bring about social transformation. Okay, if we had to bring about transformation in the society, then do we do that by looking at what the law used to be in the past? Obviously not. Law has certain purpose so as to bring about transformation in the society. So it cannot be based on how people's common consciousness or their spirit, as it evolved in the past. So yes, that's essentially the case. Okay, and these are some of the important, criticisms of this idea of, ideas of this idea of Folkgeist. And last but not the least, you see that quite often laws are not really an outcome of spontaneous, growth or continuity. Sometimes laws are also outcome of some kind of violent struggles. We see, this. Look at the Soviet legal system. It was the outcome of a revolution. Look at the French Civil Code. It was an outcome of revolution as well. So those developments will not be accounted for by this idea of, cannot be accounted for by this idea of Folkgeist. So to conclude, it's fine, okay, as I said, it is necessary that people respect their own laws. It is necessary that they have some kind of respect for their own legal system. But then this idea has limited utility. Okay, quite often it has the possibility of blocking our mind to other possibilities. Maybe in other legal system, in some other country, they have come up with a better solution with a problem that we also face. Okay, it's of similar nature. Okay, we are all humans. There's a possibility that we come across similar problems, and then some other country in some other legal system has better solution to that. Okay, in such case, obviously looking inwards doesn't really help. And we studied in CLS the importance of comparative legal system, in which we look at how comparative law could be of help for legislators, for judges, as well as for academicians and students. So yes, that's the limitation that I find with respect to this idea of historical jurisprudence as was propounded by Carl von Savigny, as well as his this idea of folk justice. So that's it.